Three, two, one. Okay.
Okay, we're live.
That
Well,
was fun.
welcome everybody to Our Bright Future number 17 with Judy Koons. We're so excited about this conversation, and we've had so much buildup in the community. Really clear that there is a thirst for this kind of conversation in our community right now, and we're so excited. So, just a little introduction on Judy. We had a
We're live.
preparation for this interview. So from early, Judy's been in the health exploration field, living health exploration basically for her whole life. From some early experiences of chronic disease and symptoms of that, Judy focused her life on exploring the true nature of health, what illness is, what our natural vital health, what we're capable of, leading her family to call her the true health detective, and then creating a coaching practice around that mission and quest in her life. She's been leading practitioners, training practitioners for years in medical medium practices. And recently she found her desire and need for food to lift. And since that, she's been telling me that she's seen a lot of other things drop, and she's had a whole new experience of the body and health. So in OwnStream, we talk a lot about resiliency, sovereignty, becoming free and independent of the systems that are corrupt around us, especially in these times. And we often talk about what would it mean to be sovereign? How do we build sovereignty and freedom from these systems? And there's a lot of ways we talk about that. When Judy and I were talking in preparation for this interview, we talked about what is total freedom from food, from the food system, from the healthcare system look like. And we knew that was going to be a really rich conversation for today. So Judy knows this is all possible from her own experience and is really excited to share it with you. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Theresa. Thank you, Stephen, for having me here. When I started sharing that I was going to be on OwnStream, I couldn't believe how many people came out of the woodwork sharing how beautiful you two are and how valuable what you've been doing has been. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Judy. And it's really nice to meet you. And I think just to sort of get us started, it'd be interesting to hear, sort of like the early phases of your journey, like when you were younger. When did you begin to kind of recognize that there was an interest in you in this topic of health in the body and the various themes that we'll explore today vis-a-vis what you were experiencing? So, for example, was there any sort of thing that happened as a young person or some sort of inspiring person, or maybe you got sick and kind of could see that how things would typically be managed was totally wrong and you felt like there was another direction? Kind of let's start there, and earliest experiences that kind of mark, if you will, like the early chapters in this journey.
It definitely has been a journey, to say the least. By the time I was around 15 or 16 years old, I was already experiencing headaches and migraines, like migraines maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And it seemed like everyone else was okay. Like in comparison, I was different. And yet nobody from the outside could really recognize what I was dealing with because I functioned. I did what I had to do. I went to work. I did my best to hang with friends until I couldn't anymore. And I kept looking and looking for practitioners that might be able to help me. And they all just kept giving me more and more and more to do and more things to take. And nothing was really helping. And it was extremely overwhelming. After a while, all I was doing was going to work and paying for practitioners and supplements. Friends, life, that didn't exist for me. And even though I had access to a lot of really great practitioners, little pieces here and there I'd gather up, but nothing was helping me. And because nobody else could really tell what was happening for me, chronic illness is known for that. From the outside in, you can't really tell. It's silent pain or it's silent struggle. And so I decided that because no one was going to help me, and this was a gradual thing, probably over a period of 2 or 3 years. I don't know where it came from. I don't expect us to know, but somewhere inside, I knew that there were answers that I could find myself. Whether it was my path to do that so that I could actually eventually help people. I didn't know that at the time. I was being very self-oriented. And so I started studying everything. I can't tell you how many modalities I've studied in my lifetime up to the point of having a really good understanding about how I could work with that. But everything from Rolfing training, like I grew up in Canada and I came down to the US to start doing the Rolfing training. And then I went all the way to Brazil. Oh, it's magical. And I learned so much about the human body and so much more about how we can do it holistically. Like that's what magic is to me, is understanding the energetic and the mental and the emotional and the spiritual pieces of us. We think this is what's real for us or what we are. And then we add these other aspects to it and magic starts happening. Well, that was just the physical structural part. And then I realized there was a whole bunch of emotional, mental release and different things that were happening as well. But I kept working it. I'm like, this isn't enough. Somehow this isn't enough. I know I'm not expressing the amount of energy that I could. So I just kept working through the psychology and through university and through all those things. And eventually it was like, well, maybe I want to be a doctor. And then I started looking into the limitations and they have to stick to. So I went, no, I like to color outside the lines too much. So I just kept studying, supplements and nutrition and on and on and on. And then a lot of spiritual studies. I started meditating. I think I was in my early 20s, but it was all a practice. And I didn't want to have practice after practice after practice after practice in my life. So I needed to get to the root with all of it. It wasn't just about managing anything or, willpowering my way through it. So I kept adding things or subtracting things. Honestly, that there was this shift in my late 20s, probably, where I started subtracting things. No more self-help books, no more medical books, no more anything. At that point, I was reading, the internet. It happened. I was so excited because then I could read science, especially student studies through Johns Hopkins or Mayo. And that was my leisure reading. So I was putting all these pieces together. About 2018, I came across Medical Medium, and it was fantastic because there's times in my life where I've come across things that all the pieces started really fitting together that I'd gathered up. And with Medical Medium, I gathered most of the pieces, but I hadn't put them together that way. I started working with viruses and herpetic and different pieces. But there was pieces that really clicked when that came along. Again, I'd already gathered up most of those pieces, but then I started working with the Medical Medium information and all of those things that I'd really, gained success with, because by then I wasn't experiencing headaches all the time and migraines all the time. I actually could get ready the day before a vacation instead of 3 days before in case I had a migraine, all that prep that I was doing ahead of time. And then I implemented the Medical Medium information, all the pieces that I'd gathered up a little differently, and click, click, click. All of a sudden I was waking up and there was no working practices to get moving in the day. And I really got to the root of the chronic illness I was born with. And by then I was already working with people, but the pieces just kept coming together because I was seeing what was happening for individuals and I was able to put those patterns together. I've always been a person that's looked for the golden threads. So through every religion that I studied, it was like, okay, what are the golden threads that go through all of these? Because then I can drop the rest. I can drop all the rest. And so with health and with everything else in my life, those golden threads, It doesn't have to be complicated. There doesn't have to be a lot of anything. As long as there's a golden thread that moves through there, it's caught my attention. And I have a tendency to do that because whether it's this side of the story or this side of the story, I'm looking for the golden threads that work through both. That's how I come to that discernment that allows me to really get focused. Come to today. There were so many things that I dove deep into that I was able to let go of the rest. Just let go of it because it either was a practice that I had to add on to the other practices, or I had uncovered all of these pieces that just didn't fit or just didn't make sense. And now it's really fun to help others let go of that because I have that much energy. Sleep isn't important to me so much anymore. I still do because I'm running around in a physical body and I want to give it its space to do what it does. But through the process, coming to understand that there is a self-healing ability. Like you think about it, you get a cut. What do you need to do? Really? It heals itself. If there's something in the way, it gets infected or it doesn't heal properly or it heals more slowly. So all I started focusing on is what can we get out of the way, because the rest of this is happening naturally. And that was so exciting when that started happening for me, because then it wasn't, and I don't go with names or labels anymore, but there's some things that I attribute to being more masculine and some things that I attribute to being more feminine. And I think about that in everyone because we're all both. Some of us are a little more and some of us, whatever. That's our makeup, but we're all really made of the same stuff. It's just a matter of how it's been put together. And so I recognized that I wasn't forcing anything anymore. And all I was doing was getting rid of everything in the way. And all of this started happening. So for me, that was like, woo, let's do this, because then there's no effort. There's so little efforting. I don't have to effort. And I did enough of that. When I realized it could be this easy, it was like, oh, it's like being able to breathe out after holding your breath for years and years and years, lifetimes maybe. So short version of my journey so far.
So many juicy things in there. Thank you for that. And it's amazing how the medical system wants us to treat symptoms and think that each of these individual things is its own disease that requires a doctor or a system to address, and that we must go outside of ourselves, right, for healing. That's the training in so many ways, whether it's religion or medical system, right? And so what an amazing revelation to see. And I love how you described the simple cut. It's like our body knows how to heal. So maybe, one follow-up to that question that I have is, what did you discover, maybe on a more macro and also personally thinking about what you were going through, like migraines, needed to get out of the way? Like, what was your experience of that needed to get out of the way? A number of the people who are in our community have studied medical medium, but not everyone may be familiar. So I'm curious if you can just describe that for people. What are some of the things that you've discovered need to get out of the way of our own self-healing ability?
I try and simplify as much as possible, because otherwise nobody's going to follow my path. It doesn't make sense to do that, right? But we think if we start asking questions about what's accumulating. So when it comes to accumulation physically, we're talking about toxins or things we're exposed to, or we're talking about some things we're not even aware of that have accumulated even before birth physically. And then we go into the mental and we think about, okay, what has accumulated mentally? And that shows up in the physical body. It shows up in the environment too, but the energetics of us shows up in our external world based on what we've accumulated or based on what we haven't released or let go of. And anyone that's working with you all knows Oracle Girl and knows most of that is just happening. But there's so much in the way that it happens maybe a little more slowly than we want. So when I looked at medical medium, it was so easy to see that the whole process was about letting go of the accumulation that built up in the physical body. So when we talk about fats, even as simple as fats, that accumulates in the physical body. That's not who we are. And so when we release that accumulation, then the self-healing ability has the ability to do everything it's designed to do. It looks like, and that was something very interesting for me because I was already working with people. So when I came across the medical medium information and started using that to help the people I was working with, it became so obvious that their self-healing ability, their ability to heal their bodies within all of it, just meant we needed to drop those pieces that were in the way. And I was sitting one day, I was like, okay, how can I really help people? Because I'm very intuitive and I'm very kinesthetic. So I can feel another individual, but how do I portray that? How do I share that with them in a way? And I was sitting at my computer and all of a sudden a spreadsheet showed up and all of these things that were accumulated in the body, I started being able to track with numbers so that individuals could see where they're at. And then we could track and help them recognize, these are the things that are accumulated. Let's bring those back to balance so that, you're back on track. Medical medium is simple. It's nature. It's very much about nature. You add the supplements in, and that gets a little carried away, in my opinion, because our bodies really don't need it. I always explain it this way. We're talking about energy. The body is energy. Everything organizes around energy, right? Including what we see as physical. The way medical medium works is all of these foods and supplements bring in a signature, an energy signature, and they become transportation for that energy signature. So if we focus on the energy signature that's about cleaning up or about less accumulation or any of those pieces, then we get everything out of the way. But when I look at medical medium, I look at that underlying energetic aspect, and then food shifts and supplements shift, because supplements are just that too. They bring in an energy signature. And I like to remind everybody that we've got this energetic space around us that holds so much more than we're aware of, and we can access that too. So when we take those supplements, we're accessing also this energetic around us, and there's a synergistic that's happening. And the more we're aware of it, the more we accept this energetic piece, the better this is going to work, or the less we need to take. So medical medium is really nature oriented. It's, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, and maybe cooked for a while if that's your combination, because a lot of people need to start quite slowly based on the accumulation that they have. But we're working with things that come from nature as much as possible. And that's what we are. It's so important. We think about going out in nature and we feel so good. There's a reason for that, because we are nature. And we've been taught out there that we're separate from it, to be fearful of it, and as soon as we start dropping those beliefs, then all of this other comes together that much more effectively and efficiently, in my opinion.
I'd love to hear you talk with some specificity about how you employed the medical medium work, and were there, and particularly early on, were there other kind of people or teachings or modalities, to put words on things, that you may have looked at? Were there other things that you explored? But then maybe you could talk about, like, okay, so you're having these chronic migraines, it sounds like. And what was the journey like? What did you actually do, and how did that go? And you started trying this and then this happened. I'd love to just hear sort of the journey of, like, one specific case of how this unfolded for you.
So migraine, I would have a migraine, and immediately the pain is so intense that the first thing that I'm looking for is pain management, because I can't even think. Like my tools out the window. Practices, heck with that. Who wants to sit in this expanded emotional, place when you're hurting like that? It's enough to just lay in bed and just moan.
Yeah, I've
Um,
had migraines. I am not looking for anything but, a dark room, no sensory experiences, and maybe a couple of Advil.
um, so once the migraine is done, okay, I don't want to experience that again. What was the trigger? What were the triggers? Because I always say it's never one thing. To think that our physical exists in isolation, away from the emotional, mental, and spiritual, is one of the issues with medical system that I have, because we're not pieced up. Through the Rolfing practice, if my shoulder's bothering me, I know to go to my hips first in order to support that, in order for this to release. So piecing it up, it just doesn't work for me. Every cell is affected by every other cell in the physical body. So what am I looking for? Okay, is this physical? Is this mental? Is this emotional? Is this spiritual? Okay, all of them. I got to that point, understanding that migraine had that involvement, all those contributing factors. So what is it physically that I can work with to prevent that? What's accumulated? So stress, of course, shows up in our physical body. That's mental, emotional, physical stress and spiritual stress, because we've got that energetic thing that's happening on the planet all the time. And we as energetic beings pick up on that, and that can create, contraction in the tissues or misalignment too. So pretty soon I was looking at, okay, how can I physically align this body? How can I release the stress that's in the physical aspect of my body so that I can work on what are the emotions involved? What are the triggers emotionally? And for me, it was feeling overwhelmed. When I'm feeling really overwhelmed, there's pressure. That's where I feel it in the physical body. And that pressure I could release by, I facilitate the work by Byron Katie as well. Her questions are such an incredible practice if I'm going to use a practice. And it's about coming into silence and letting my body talk to me, or letting whatever talk to me. So I was able to use that process and a couple other things to just go, oh, overwhelm. How can I drop that? How can I see the truth of life as happening versus it happening to me? It happens for me. And so overwhelm, I dropped that. It took me a while, but I got to that point. And then it was like, okay, mentally, what are the triggers that happen for me with this experiencing migraine? Because I try to not take it on either. That's a mental aspect. My migraines or my chronic illness, and so I was able to detach from it a little bit mentally by talking about, this is happening. What's it trying to tell me? So mentally, I was working out, what's that migraine trying to tell me? And it was really clear. You're doing too much. You need to find some balance. And once that happened for me, and it was incremental, but once that happened, it was like, oh, I know I love what I do. I know I have all this energy. I know I like to be of value. And where does this fit in that? So that started shifting how lifestyle happened. And then spiritually, where's the relationship? If I'm talking about spiritual, where does that relationship sit? Where am I? What am I in relationship with? And that was another thing that came from being in that silence. The the answers came not from outside, but from within, because I created silence and I wasn't really looking outside myself at that point. And then I came back around to the physical and the accumulative pieces. And when that spreadsheet was downloaded, there was one piece that I hadn't totally settled with yet, and that was chronic dehydration. So we all think that water is fantastic, drink lots of water, lots of water. Well, if it's not living water, all of a sudden, all these electrolytes are brought out of your system and you continue to increase chronic dehydration. So I got intuitive and I'm like, okay, how many generations back can I accumulate this chronic dehydration? Turns out that I had accumulated from 3 generations back. So my mom, my grandmom, and my great grandmom, they all had chronic dehydration and they passed that to me. So when I was born, I was extremely chronically dehydrated. Well, all of a sudden my electrical knowledge kicks in and it's like, well, of course, the nerve system is an electrical system, but without living water, that electrical system is going to be too hot and you're going to be crossfiring all over the place. Well, all of a sudden migraines come on. Then we talk about MSG and getting rid of that. And we talk about things like massive adrenaline push. That's going to also cause the electrical system to go offline or in some cases overdo. Migraines, I find mostly are, physical tension that puts pressure on our primary pulse, which is the fluid that moves around the brain and the spinal nerves. And as soon as you have tension in your neck, that nerve is pretty small. You need to have that movement in order to have proper cooling, proper nutrients, proper everything to the nervous system. So getting rid of the physical tension and then bringing up the living water so that I wasn't chronically dehydrated anymore. That took me a couple of years to turn that around. And that's another level of accumulation because you're accumulating chronic dehydration. So that living water with the lemon, fresh squeezed lemon in the water and the honey, that's all medical medium stuff, right? So I was drinking fabulous water with minerals and everything, but it was still dead. And I didn't connect with that. And as soon as I understood the bioelectrics, the migraines started decreasing almost immediately, even though I'd decreased them and I'd already figured out the physical. So I was able to decrease the intensity of it. They weren't always gone. And I was still having a migraine, every, once a month or depends on how stressful my life was. But as soon as I brought that living water in there and started doing a bit more cleansing with a couple other things, migraine's gone. I haven't had one in going on 5 years. Not one. And I think I had headaches 24/7. Like there was always a headache. There was always a low grade headache. So it was just, I know I can do this. I can get through the day. I can get done what I needed to do. I have had maybe 3 headaches in 5 years, and they've been seriously mild. And one of them had something to do with alcohol. So I have to give that just credit for that. But the other 2, seriously, it was just, too many other contributing factors, lack of sleep and dehydration and stuff like that. But no headaches. 3 that were probably earned because I wasn't paying attention that day or something, right?
Right.
But
Well, would you talk just really quickly, since you just mentioned it, I think that's really interesting, living water. What do you put in the water? Is it lemon, honey, anything else?
so I add the honey in order to keep the adrenals calm and to make the lemon a little more palatable after drinking so much lemon water. The lemon helps with so many things in the body, but you can use fresh squeezed lemon juice, fresh squeezed lime juice. You can use lemon slices or lime slices. You can use fresh berries like blackberries or raspberries or blueberries. You just muddle them a little. And the living energy in those fruits engages the living bioelectrics in the water again. So you start with pretty good water. I use a Berkey filter because I like no electricity and no chemicals and no anything to get my water fresh and clean, but it's still dead. So unless you're pristine spring water, you have to do something to get the chlorine and the fluoride out, because that's in the way of your healing process, so to speak. Now, we're going to go into that a little more. I find that there's this huge gap, right? Because I can check out anything that I look at when it comes to food, and I can collapse the beliefs I have about it. So living water versus dead water versus chlorine versus, I can collapse the benefit or the negative to any of those things. Same with supplements. But there's a gap between where we are all accumulated and all that to this place where we can just access just energetically. And we can be doing both at the same time, but working through that and dropping things as you go is a really fantastic way to move towards that freedom that we're all wanting, and to jump, like imagine jumping from one side of the Grand Canyon to the other. Sometimes it's that much of a gap. So if we can close the gap and then we can move into further, just energetically accessing everything that is given to us, that's a natural thing. We use foods and supplements in order to do that a little bit. Well, a lot really for a lot of people, especially if we're still thinking that this is what we are. Let's, bridge the gap. There's a path to go across to get to the other side, or to get close enough so that you can do a leap. Because I like leaping, but I like to leap when I know I'm going to be somewhat successful. So.
Oh, it's really rich what you described in terms of that journey with the migraine. Woo, and the various intuitions and levels of health. And I personally can say, we followed medical medium a lot last year. And the thing that I've most consistently held on to is lemon water. And I recently started adding honey, and I completely feel a difference of like being hydrated. It feels completely different than drinking regular water. So I took completely regular water, filtered water. Our water comes from a well, but like wherever your water comes from. I wanted to ask you, Judy, we definitely want to move soon into talking to you about dropping food, but I wanted to ask you quickly, and a lot of people, I should say, number of people submitted great questions ahead of time about their own health conditions, which we'll ask those toward the end. And if you're watching live, please add questions to the chat, because we will get to those toward the end of the interview. But I know you recently did a video on getting COVID, and I was wondering if you could share that with us, what your experience was of that, getting whatever is called COVID out there, and maybe in relation to kind of what you've already described to us as how we remove what's accumulated. Like, what was your experience with that coming into your experience, and how did you deal with it?
Just in the last couple months, I've started opening it up. So I understand virology enough to know that viruses, as they mutate, they become weaker. That's why we have flus that are stronger and weaker, but they mutate. They're more virulent. They can be passed more, but they're weaker. Now, energetically, do we even have to be part of that? I don't know. I don't think so. But the whole idea of where's your vibration, we're still living in physical bodies. So we get to be exposed to these things. And so I opened it up. And of course, one of my kids brought it home. And then I was looking after a friend's daughter that ended up in emergency with COVID. And so her daughter never showed symptoms, but showed positive, and I ended up getting it. I want everybody to understand, no matter how strong your immune system is, you can still contract a virus. You can still be exposed to bacteria. It's that you have this really strong defense system, and it deals with it very, very quickly. Often you feel like you're really sick because you have this really strong defense system. When your immune system's low or not functioning well, you end up not really feeling sick. But yet underlying, your immune system's working like crazy, and you wonder why you're exhausted for a couple months. So your immune system doesn't have this really strong defense system that pops in. And so my defense system kicked in really strong. And I was okay with that. I don't have any fear around life or death or or anything anymore. So if something's going to take me out, it's going to take me out. The physical body anyway. The energetic, it's solid, right? It's but I did something that of course I would do. When I started feeling fevers, I was in this mode of burning up anything that doesn't serve me. And so I just stated that straight to the body, straight to the universe, straight to source. I said, okay, let's use these fevers. Let's get rid of the virus, but let's also get rid of anything that no longer serves me. I was flat out. And I had some of my practitioners testing for me to see how much of what I was dealing with was actually COVID. And it was less than 30%. It was like 20, 25% of this is COVID. The rest of it is all the personality and all the beliefs and all the energetics in the physical body that no longer serve. I got through the COVID fairly quickly. You know, I had a doctor's help. There's lots of doctors out there that are willing to go beyond. They're working with, you know, protocols that are really quick and helping. I didn't really feel I needed any of that, but she's someone I was able to contact. So I was just, she's like, why don't you just do a little bit of ivermectin just to make sure you don't end up with long haul, whatever. It was like, okay, I took it the first day. The energetics were so nasty that it was like, oh, why would I do this to my body? I took it the second day and I was like, this still isn't working. Like, it's not just getting rid of virus. It's not working energetically for me. So I stopped. I went to my normal things that I do. And a couple of weeks I was up and running around, but most of the thinking has gone. So I talk about 95% of what we look around at isn't beneficial for us. It's not in alignment with who we are. It's not in alignment with nature. It's not in alignment with our freedom, our sovereignty. And so when I finally was moving around again, I didn't have much thought. And it was so interesting because all of that thought had shifted, all of those thinkings had shifted, all the energy had shifted, and all I wanted to do was get rid of stuff. The value that I thought was on things had fallen away. It had fallen away so dramatically that my kids started wondering if I was going to give them away. I was like, no, you guys are safe. But my husband still jokes about it. He's like, he wears this night hood that covers his eyes and his bald head. And he said he always woke up in the morning looking a little bit to see where he was in case I'd taken him to the recycle place or something. I was like, okay, was it that dramatic? And they said, yes, it was extremely dramatic. And I've been cleaning up over the last couple of years, letting go of things already. And so when truckloads of stuff started going out of our house, they started getting a little concerned. And it happened really quickly too, because as soon as I was feeling good enough to do that, there were piles of stuff, like piles. I think I got rid of maybe 4 bookcases and everything in them and unloaded the rest of them. And so again, I come back to that belief or that understanding that life is happening for me, not to me. So if COVID was happening to me, I might have ended up with a lot more symptomatic and a lot more, you know, I wouldn't have been able to feel the energetics of that drug piece. I wouldn't have been able to connect with the energetics of the supplements that I was using instead. And if life was happening to me, there's a heaviness. You can feel it. Like if you close your eyes and you think about life happening to you, just notice what's happening in your body. What does it feel like? Does it feel light and uplifting? Does it feel dark? Does it feel heavy? Is there somewhere in your body that catches your attention? Now, if you're chronically ill, it might be hard to tell where it is because there's already so much noise. But what does that feel like? Now, what if we take a deep breath and we recognize that life is for us? Nature's always working for us from within because we are nature. Then all of a sudden, what do I feel in my body? Does my body feel dark or does it feel heavy the same way? What is the difference? just going back and forth a couple times, your body will choose homeostasis and it will start working towards that feeling of upliftment and lightness and all of that. So life working for me. Okay, COVID worked for me. I got rid of so much mind chatter that I'd been able to work through. I'd been able to manage. I knew it wasn't true, but it just dropped. And so COVID, I was stopped. There was no working happening. There was no anything. And all of this was able to drop because I wasn't doing practices. I wasn't doing anything to drop it. It just dropped. There was nothing in the way of that dropping. Fast forward just a little bit. It's easier for me to help people through COVID now. One, because I experienced it. And two, nobody has to deal with it like I did because I asked for that. About day 5 or 6, I was like, what was I thinking? Like, seriously, I obviously didn't know how much else I was going to release, or I wouldn't have asked for that. But it was such a beautiful thing to come out of that and realize that there was a stronger sense of this ability to self-heal. There was a stronger sense of the sovereignty. There was a stronger sense of life is for me. Source is for me. And every time I get rid of more accumulation, that's what I end up with, is just that really strong knowing that there isn't one thing in life that isn't for me. Even if it's really tough moment. And the brain is doing all sorts of things, the mind, not the brain, because the brain is solid. It's good for us. But the mind, all those thoughts that come from somewhere that I'm not, it didn't come from within. It was something that came from without. And as soon as I have those moments, just having that strength of knowing that it's for me, this isn't important. This can't get a hold the same way. The mind thoughts that come in can't get a hold. It was hard for my family because as soon as I came out of that, I was like, no advertisements. I don't want to hear anything about advertisements. I don't want to watch TV. I don't want the TV on. I don't want to watch movies. I definitely, I'm not interested in any of the news, not the good or the bad, because they're just the opposite sides of the war. I'm done with that. All of it was just no, no, no. And I wasn't doing a lot of that anyway, but it was really clear that that's no longer part of this. So I was okay with letting go of the 95%. And so here I am today, stronger, happier, healthier, easier, more sovereign, all of it because of that moment. And you can ask too, if you get COVID, what do you want to release? Your body's working at it anyway. Take advantage of it because it's for you. It's for you every single time. There are supplements that are beneficial. Absolutely. One of my favorites is probably the zinc, the ionic zinc sulfate. And I know there's lots of articles out there that say zinc sulfate accumulates, irritating. We're talking about ionic zinc sulfate, which is different. It's smaller. It's going to absorb into your lymph system. It's regulatory. It's immune boosting. It's really beneficial in getting rid of viruses and bacteria, bringing them back into balance. It's my favorite of all of them. My kids have been really preventative. My family is preventative. They use ionic zinc sulfate or the energy of it, whatever it is that they're in alignment with, because we have the access to that energetic around us all the time. And we can just draw it in. We can breathe and draw it. And we can ask our body to come back to that autonomy where we can access everything that's around us. That's a golden thread through all religions. Ask and you shall receive, right? I'm not that direction. If anything, I would go with Course in Miracles before anything else, but even that has dropped away because it's all here. And yet, for me, again, this is my path. It's my instructions that are being shared with me because I've gotten rid of so much, I can hear it. But it's also a golden thread that says everything that you need is available to you. I get to prove that to myself by asking lots and lots of questions and letting the answers come to me, because they do. Whether it's from inside reflected back to me, you can feel the difference between something that's resonating and something that's not. Just drive by a factory that's, spitting out lots of black and feel your body. And then drive by a orange grove that's organic. You can feel the difference in your body. So knowing whether that information is coming out from outside of you because it's reflected from you, or it's just somebody talking so they can work it out for themselves, you can feel it. That's the embodiment aspect of it for me. Okay. I feel like I'm just talking and talking and talking.
Well, there's plenty of follow-ups we could explore there, but I kind of want to shift now into your relationship to food and kind of how that's changed, and particularly as relates to the kind of usual way we approach food. There's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we want to eat till we're full. We want to, there's all these kind of understandings about protein and what we need for the body. These kinds of things that are kind of coming, these memes that sort of attack us. And so talk a bit about, so you were talking earlier about kind of, letting go of things. Talk about your journey with food, specifically more recently as the need for it and your body has changed and what that's been like. Well, how has that looked?
So through the medical medium process and all the other things that I've done, I've gotten rid of so much accumulation that it's not stored in my body anymore. And imagine a liver functioning, so I use 0 to 100. So I want my liver to be functioning as close to 100 as possible. If my liver is functioning at 10%, because it's all cluttered up with all this accumulation, there's no, all the chronic dehydration, all the toxic heavy metals, all the things we're exposed to in this world, in our reality, what we think of as real. What am I going to get out of the food? My liver is instrumental in making sure that that food can be broke down so that I can access that energetics, that I can access those micronutrients, that I can access, versus a liver that's functioning at 80, 90 plus percent. How much food do I actually need to get everything that I need to access the energetics? So my liver's functioning at 10%. I'm going to need this much food, because I can't digest it to get the energetics out of it, to get the nutrients out of it, versus 90 plus percent. I need this much food to get the energetics and the nutrients, et cetera, out of it. So automatically my calorie needs, because we have and this is my opinion, even medical medium hasn't talked about it, but all these individuals in our nation and worldwide as well, some nations are a little different than others, but there's so much obesity. Well, of course there's going to be, because the body knows how to get that energy and those nutrients based on everything else out of calories. So if the body is starving, what is it going to want? More and more and more calories. And if you're not able to digest that because of the accumulation, of course there's going to be overabundance of calories, and there's still not the nutrition for the healing. So people are just trying to get the nutrients, even though they're not able to process them. So automatically my calorie amount goes down, our needs go down, because my body's so efficient at getting that energetic signature out of that food or out of that supplement. So I don't personally take supplements very often anymore, even the ones that aren't in the soil and all of that. I'm energetically working with that now. And it just started happening. I have to do research to understand what's happening most of the time, because I'm like, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. But there's so many pieces to it when it comes to food, because not only is there that calorie aspect or the efficiency of the body or the accumulation that's contributing to illness and premature aging. I love what Jacqueline Hobbs says about aging. Really? Does the body have to age? That has been a question of mine since, I don't know, maybe in my early 20s. Does the body truly have to age? And why is it aging? And then all these answers start coming from all these different directions, right? My whole MO is curiosity. If that was the one word I was left with, I'm happy. Because out of curiosity comes all this really great, juicy information that we'll get to put together somehow. I should have probably been an engineer, not even a doctor or anything, but this piece about food, think about what is mentally attached to it, what is emotionally attached to food, what is habitual. Stephen, you shared, breakfast, lunch, dinner, eat till full. Really? What happens if we question that? What happens? Now, I'm not going to encourage anybody to just go off and force, intermittent fasting or anything like that, because I don't think that that's necessarily, it's forceful. And although nature is very intense and it can be very, it can put you from here to here really quickly, it also is not forcing you. You can listen to the signs and hit high ground if there's a flood coming. There's lots of cultures that do that. You're not forced to be in the flood. So to me, it's about listening and putting myself where I need to be or where I'm being called to or where I'm encouraged to go to. And it's the same with food. How many people eat out of love? Grandma's sharing all this amazing food that she's cooked, and it's love. We connect out of this social space around food so much. So it's a matter of just looking at how that contributes and how the belief, the food supply shortage that everybody's talking about, talk about fear. So everyone is associating food to staying alive. So all that fear comes in. And of course, that's going to indicate to you, eat a little more, put a little extra on just in case we need it in the future, right? But food is used. It's been used. So my journey has been to watch how my calorie needs are less on an ongoing basis. And then every thought that I have come up around food, I challenge. So I don't like to offend anyone or hurt anyone's feelings. So when someone brings me a treat or that's food oriented, how tough is that for me to say no? But why wouldn't I? If you go out for dinner, what is it around? It's around, what is the biggest thing everybody does? They go out for dinner and that's a treat. Well, for me, I would much rather just go, sit in a park with everybody or go play a little, kick the ball around or something, because orienting around food is a beautiful thing if you start recognizing what your beliefs are around it. Now, when I started dropping food, the habit was the biggest part of it. I had to become extremely curious about the habit and somewhere that came from. I can't tell you that I did this personally. The physical body did this, but every time I turned around, I was in the fridge. What am I here for? So slowing down, like I couldn't connect with why I needed to be there, but I noticed 50 times a day I was in the fridge. Oh, I need to make food for my family, or I need, I must be hungry by now. Close the fridge. Our house is set up in a bit of a circle, so there's a dining room and all of that, but I was doing circles out of habit to get to the fridge, to get to the kitchen, to get to the whatever, right? And so I quit doing circles. I just did half circles for a while, but it got easier and easier as I recognized that the habit is the biggest reason we do it. And then there's the emotional aspect. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't enjoy feeling uncomfortable. How can I do something different. Well, I can fill my belly and it can feel nice and full, and it'll distract me from that discomfort of an emotion. So just breaking it down, because it's never one thing. And pretty soon my thoughts around food were gone, because I'd either dropped them or I'd worked through the process of the work in order to get silent around it. And I realized there was very little food that I ever needed that wasn't related to fear, love, the habit, not hurting someone, all of those things that contribute that are tied in with food. I just unraveled it. Consciously, unconsciously, the unraveling happened. I think it was much easier for me because my body was already working efficiently. I didn't have a whole lot of deficiencies in my body. I was already aware of breath and how those energetics could be brought in. So it's automatic for me now. But when I first started, I was like, I think I can get everything energetically that I need. Let's see. And so I would go into a breathing practice, or I would just start breathing or being conscious of my breath, especially when I was in the mountains and all those pollens were kicking around and all that. And that helped because that was a process, right? That was, again, a practice that if the practice leads to always having to practice, I won't play with. But if the practice leads to me not needing the practice, then I'm in. Because the whole idea is that I'm engaging what is already available and already here. So dropping food was a gradual thing. And all of a sudden I realized after, I don't know, a couple months, I was doing less than 500 calories a day, not losing any weight, incredible energy. Like, what am I going to do with myself? I don't really need to sleep. Everybody else is sleeping. The world is dark. What do? I'm not going to sit on my computer the whole time. So I needed to, I didn't need to, but I found myself finding other things to do and just reprogramming the whole thing. And then every time Oracle Girl talks about something about, she puts these little hints in there, and I do listen. Although I got very irritated for a little while with the question and answer pieces when my mind was not wanting any of that. But the tracks are amazing. Talk about remind us that our beings are so capable, that there's so much more potential than we're accessing. And so at that point, I was like, I wonder what it would be like to dry fast. No water, no food. It was just a curiosity thing. And it took me a little while. I would do afternoons, and then I would do days, and then I would do like 4 days, and then 6 days. And sometimes in the middle of that, I would have a drink of lemon water. And I would question, okay, did I really need that? Do I not need that? Listening to my body always, because there was no forcing. Not going to do that. There's lots of breatharianisms, individuals starting to come forward with how they did it or what they do for a practice, but it's still a practice. And then there's a lot of forcing going on. And I was like, yeah, I like that. Now I understand what's happening. I'm much more efficient with the energy, but I'm still not willing to go into those practices and force it. It's still about curiosity, because I don't want to do anything to this that this isn't encouraging or asking or giving answers for. So it was really about, it just didn't resonate those. And I don't like titles. I don't really care whether I have titles or not. True Health Detective is something I picked up, and it's about marketing, letting people know what I do. But I couldn't label this because it's not something. Because if there's food and this eats, it eats. There's no guilt. There's no concern. There's no anything. But if this doesn't eat, there's also no fear that I'm going to trash my adrenals or I'm going to die of starvation or anything like that. So all those pieces, dropping them or working through them or something working through it, has just landed me here, where there's either eating or there isn't. And it doesn't matter anymore. And when I'm in really pristine places like the tops of the mountains, that's when something kicks in. It's like, oh, this is like a huge meal. This is like Thanksgiving meal. And it's so incredibly invigorating and recharging. But it's something that's happened over time. Again, getting those things out of the way, dropping mostly more than anything.
Wow. You answered so many of the questions I had just in what you shared, but I wanted to hear like what you just said about the mountaintop. One of the questions I was going to ask you is what nourishes you now? Or what's your association with nourishment, and what does it feel like? What changes have you felt in the body or just in your experience of yourself in this, and maybe your health too, in this process? Like, is that with you, has your understanding of yourself, your experience changed? I know you mentioned dropping more things to me recently, so curious about that.
Uh, the things I've noticed, what nourishes me, let's start there. People, not necessarily conversation, but being in connection with others that resonate. That's so nourishing. Being in nature is super nourishing. I think it's nourishing to everyone, but I can feel the connection that much more prominently. I can feel the energy of the tree roots and the plants, and it's like the plants are talking to me. I love gardening. I've always loved gardening. I'm like a mad scientist gardener. Like, I don't do rows. I don't, it's like what comes up gets to live. If it's volunteer, it's like, let's do this. And it's like I can hear and translate what those are beneficial for, or, if it's time for me to, swipe a green bean or a couple raspberries, I can hear that. So that's increased, that's intensified. The more that I do this, I can feel and hear and process energy easier. So I'm super sensitive in my energetic system and the intuition and all the energy that's traveling on the planet. I would probably be dealing with a lot of headaches because of that, because it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of transforming. It's a lot of adaptability. It's a lot of all of that. But this body doesn't have any problem allowing it through. I notice it, don't get me wrong, it's there, but I don't have physical symptoms that are uncomfortable because of it the same way anymore. I can feel the intensity. I can feel the heat rising when it does. I can feel the energy, the cold, the whatever, but it's not uncomfortable. Tons of energy. Like, just so much energy. I don't know what to do with it sometimes. And it's a benefit because there's lots to do. There's so much creative space. Since the dropping of the thoughts, I'm not, again, interested in any of the positive or negative of all the news that's happening. It's like the energy happens, and then it takes a while for it to show up in reality. Our reality, what we think of. Now the energy is different. This is the past. What we're experiencing is past energy. I like playing in this energy that's right now, where it's so creative and we're creating this new space. And so I don't want to hear about this other stuff. I can help purify it. And that's what happens when people share with me now about whatever, the convoys or illness or whatever that's going on. There's so much purification heat that comes up. I'm just purifying. But that's not this here. Bring this into reality now. I really noticed that since I've gotten rid of the rest of the external noise. The more external noise that drops, oh, so beautiful what we get, what's shared. I'm going to talk for myself only, but the sharing that comes from within and knowing what's possible, it's so incredible. But there's more than that. There's so much more than that. And allowing inspiration to get through and really speak to us in that profound way. I wake up in the morning and the very first thing that there is a huge, big smile on my face. It's not grogginess. It's not anything. It's just this huge, big smile because what is life for me today? How's source opening this up so that I can understand what else is available? So juicy.
So juicy. Just got tingles
That's
everywhere.
great. We should dive into some. We had a bunch of people submit questions ahead of time. I know we probably both have a few more. Maybe we can kind of tag on at the very, very end. But we don't want to lose lose this opportunity to kind of propose a few of these that were sent ahead of time. And one here is rather specific, and I think you might be able to kind of address it more generally. But they ask, did you ever take pharmaceuticals for a chronic condition? And were you able to overcome needing them? I am looking to be free of thyroid medications. So what I'm hearing there is sort of like how to become unlocked from the pharmaceutical industry. Are there various solutions for whatever the labels are that have been, maybe handed off to people, like you have a thyroid condition or you have whatever the case may be? Is there a path out of those specific dependencies?
Absolutely. Again, I talk about getting to the root cause. Thyroid is just a symptom. And if we work from the medical medium perspective, thyroid symptoms aren't actually thyroid related, they're liver related. So as soon as we're working with the medical system that understands these symptoms, say something's going on with your thyroid. Well, it is going on with your thyroid, but your thyroid is just exhausted because it's picking up the slack for the liver. So as soon as we understand the root issues, we can start shifting what we need to use. So do we need to use meds? Most thyroid meds are suppressive. They kick your adrenals and over time, but very few doctors ever say, you can do this and this and this to look after your liver and that will stop these symptoms. It's usually you're going to have thyroid issues for life. Knowing that it's possible to heal your thyroid through looking after the rest of your body. Again, everything's connected. Once you get your liver functioning, the thyroid doesn't have to pick up the slack for the liver anymore. It's the same with the pancreas. The pancreas will do the same. The adrenals, all the glands are designed to pick up the slack when one's not working properly or has been removed. And they all have the ability to do that. So the thyroid might be challenged, but that's not the root piece. I always say I never go against your doctor because you're working with the medical system and that would be the last thing I wanted to do. But the best person to talk about meds and coming off them once you've cleaned up your body or starting to clean up your body is your pharmacist. Your pharmacist is the most important person when it comes to what your meds are doing, how can you come off them. They work for you and so does your doctor. So standing in sovereignty is like, okay, I heard this. What do you know about it? And how can you help me do what I want to do? Not going into your doctor and saying, okay, what's wrong with me? And how are you going to fix me? But, knowing that your body has the ability to heal from pretty much anything. I haven't come across much yet. So knowing that they work for you and coming off that, but there's so many natural plant-based things you can use as well, like thyroid, schisandra. It's an herb. It helps to balance a lot of those things that get attributed to thyroid. But again, don't get caught up in managing the symptoms. Go to the root cause, which is clean up your liver so that your thyroid isn't, your thyroid's this big. Your liver's doing all of these thousands of jobs and it doesn't do all those thousands of jobs when it's underwater. So all of a sudden this little thyroid has to pick up the slack for an organ that's this big. Get the big one working. That's a kingpin in your body and it affects everything else. So we look after that in this physical reality and the thyroid doesn't have to be the issue anymore.
That's super hopeful and exciting. Stephen, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, well, I want to kind of just tag on a few quick questions from the chat. Aurora is asking, is Vimergy, I think that's a brand, ionic zinc? Do you know, Judy?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I really like Vimergy products. They're a company that has pretty high integrity when their product cleanliness and strength and everything. Some of them I don't recommend because I'm looking for something else or different, but it's a pretty reliable company. But trust your body, just because the company is pretty solid. They've worked really hard to bring us some really high quality supplements. They just started with a couple in the beginning and they've done a great job of filling it out, especially for people following medical medium.
And when you got COVID, somebody asked, did you feel like it was sort of imprinted like as a man-made experience or not? And you may not have a very, I don't know how you want to approach that, but
When
what would you think?
when COVID showed up, I went seriously intuitive because there was no information about it at all. No science, no anything. And I definitely got that it was man-made and that it was multiple viruses brought together, which is exciting to me because in the beginning, it was a very strong virus. I could feel that, and it was definitely harming people. There's all sorts of things we can go in around that, but um, because virology works the way it does and viruses work the way that they do, some of the aspects of that virus were mutated out quite quickly. Some of the more harmful aspects of it, because some of the other virus pieces were more virulent but less harmful to us. So I was excited. I was very protective in the beginning of my family and friends and clients and that because it was harmful, but now it's less. So, and a lot of those harmful pieces have been mutated out. So it's okay. It's okay now, but I definitely got man-made and it was really easy to feel into at the very beginning.
Cool. Teresa, you want to take one off of maybe our pre-submitted list?
Yeah, this is the next one I was going to ask. Someone writes, as a child, I didn't want or need to eat, especially meat. So I was severely punished until the need to eat was literally beaten into me. Now, despite not needing much food at all, I can't stop eating, and fasting is almost impossible, especially in cold months. It's like the worst addiction of all, or being possessed. Years of so-called spiritual modalities workshops haven't helped. Is there anything that can be done? P.S. I'm in OG's reboot groups and got most of the related tracks. Thank you.
So that's one of the toughest ones when it's been ingrained and the energetics of the emotions and the mental are behind physical blockages. So imagine that physical blockages are a little bigger and then the emotional and mental ones are a little smaller. Sometimes it's hard to clear some of those mental, emotional energies when the physical blockages, the bigger blockages are in the way. When I feel into this question specifically, it would be about forgiveness. That's the first word that comes up. And really understanding that the physical isn't all that you are. Think about, a circle graph. Physical is just a quarter of it. Yeah, we can get our hands on it and manipulate it easier than we can mental, emotional, and spiritual, but it's no more inputting into the situation than those others that are energetic. And so opening up to the energetics and recognizing that right now, part of food for you is purifying. So purification isn't always comfortable, is it? It can be downright painful sometimes. I watched it while I laid in bed. It was seriously uncomfortable. I didn't have anything to give. And food can be a way that we slow it down. Food, eating lots can be a way that we use in order to manage that symptom. Some foods trigger the adrenals, which is a little suppressive or a little bit steroidal. Some foods are, comfort foods that we get from being young and being looked after and all that. So forgiveness is the very first thing that comes up for you specifically. And then really knowing that, one piece at a time, that forcing can be really hard on us. And it's generally not sustainable, generally. I don't know if I answered that specifically or generally for everybody, but for that person that was asking the question, that's what comes.
Yeah, I could really feel you feeling into the person while I was reading it. Thank you, Judy.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. It's fairly specific, but I think there's a lot here. I have an immune system disorder. T4 and T8 cells depressed. I have many food sensitivities and have daily sinus migraines. I have an abundance of mucus after anything that I eat or drink. My doctor for complex illnesses say I need an IV of immunoglobulin, which is not available in this country, Australia. My gut wall is probably damaged due to past endometriosis, overuse of ibuprofen to try to manage it, and before that, 10 years of birth control. I feel stuck. That's the question.
Understandably stuck. Up until recently, autoimmune was completely something that was used when there weren't answers that made sense. So when I go back to the universe, the source is not doing it to me versus the universe is doing it for me, I recognize that the body doesn't attack itself. And I say that up until recently because we've had some things introduced that can actually cause the body, again, trying to protect the body, but it can get into the tissues in order to try and clean stuff up. So autoimmune looks like a whole bunch of human cells floating around in the bloodstream, too many of those, and it looks like the body's attacking itself. But there's something missing because there's not enough looking into the blood to see what else is there. What they would find was a whole bunch of herpetic viral bodies that had embedded in the human cell. In order to get rid of that viral, the cell doesn't survive when the virus is dead. So you would have as many viral, maybe a few more human cells because they just naturally cycle. But you'd find a whole bunch of viral bodies in the bloodstream too. That's not something that's being looked for. So all of a sudden, autoimmune, it's a high viral, herpetic viral load, which means that the virus gets into the cell. Once you release all of that and understand that the underlying piece, again, we're talking about thyroid and suppressed, based on what you've had happen, based on all of those pieces, it still is often the liver. You can have different things, like you can have a really heavy viral load in the thyroid that causes suppression of those hormones or T cells or whatever. You get that back into balance. It's accumulation of viral load, accumulation of bacterial load, accumulation of toxic heavy metal load, accumulation of adrenal fatigue, accumulation of chronic dehydration, and massive accumulation in the liver. And those are the 6 things that I work with everybody in order to re-engage that ability within your body. The cut isn't healing properly. Something's in the way. So your body can heal anything. It's just you have to get what's in the way out of the way. So feeling stuck, I completely understand that. I highly recommend that you get into the medical medium information. You start really slow. Don't start with cleansing. Just start with adding more fruits and vegetables, living fruits and vegetables that are fresh. Hopefully organic if they're of the dirty dozen, but conventional fruits and vegetables are good too. Just start doing that. That's going to turn around. Fruits are going to bring those pathogens into balance. Vegetables are going to start dealing with the glucose reserves in your body that are depleted. You're going to start cleansing. Some of those fruits and vegetables will bring toxic heavy metals out of your body, and they'll start giving your liver a chance to get rid of, your liver's trying to protect you. It's gathered up all this accumulation, energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical. It's just trying to protect you. It's the storehouse that's been trying to protect you. Until you give it a chance, it can't do all the other 1,000 jobs that it's doing. So we cut back on the heavier foods. We eat some of those more living foods, and you start turning it around gradually. Now, for everybody I work with, I always tell them, give it some time, because the accumulation, it's bringing these symptoms on, right? You start bringing in fruits and vegetables and the detox starts increasing. So the first few months, it doesn't feel 100%. You don't always have lots of energy, but then all of a sudden you've brought this in, the detox is happening. This starts going down. The accumulation symptoms start going down. You still got detox for a while, but you don't have such a heavy load. This keeps going, and then it doesn't have to work so hard. And then you really start getting the energy, really start noticing the differences. Aging starts reversing. I was starting to go gray before I did medical medium. And then I did medical medium and my natural color completely returned. Symptoms that I didn't even know I had, like my eyebrows were starting to recede a bit. I didn't even really realize that because it had happened over a period of time. My eyebrows are right back down to the corners of my eyes if I'm not careful. I had lost about a quarter of hairline of hair, and it's all grown back. So my hairline, I swear I have less wrinkles now than I did 20 years ago. My muscles are stronger. I'm able to work out again in a way that really helps me be resilient and adaptable in a way that I've not been able to. In the last 3 years, I have learned to snowboard, which, I'm in my 50s now. I've learned to snowboard. I've learned to body surf, and I've started running again. That's not something I was ever really able to do. I don't do a lot of it. I'm not an extreme exercise person, but I like being fit. I like being able to do what I want to do when I get to something. Body surfing is not for the faint of heart, in my opinion. A lot of sand in a lot of places, but there's adventure again because I can do it. I'm not looking at, that's all aging is. Something in the way of the body's ability to rejuvenate. All the old age pieces, dementia, heart, all of it. Arthritis, accumulation. The cut can't heal because there's too much in the way, too much bacteria or too much agitation or irritation or inflammation or whatever. But it's the accumulation as we get rid of that. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Less expensive too.
It's very exciting because my mother has dementia, and I think we made Theresa and I are texting each other while you're talking, just sort of talking about we should hire you or talk to you or kind of have a more official conversation about our situation. So we will do that. But it's just all along the doctors have been telling us dementia. She's got like 6 to 12 months, and I keep thinking like I don't believe that. That doesn't feel right to me at all. But we can get into more of that later on. But it just shows you sort of how that old model works, and and how something new is rising. And there's a very clear intelligence that's kind of filtered into our culture now. That's sort of like I don't know if I believe that, and it's kind of making its way into everything. People, sort of challenging the status quo or not listening to the news anymore. It's really just all sort of falling apart. Anyway, we can get into that on another time. But here's another question. Just sort of, I'd like to hear, and I think this brings up an interesting topic we haven't gotten to yet, which would be interesting to hear you talk about. But detoxes. There's a detox for there's probably thousands of detoxes out there. And but what do you think about detoxes? And specifically, this person's asking about bread. What do you think about bread, and should they try to give this up?
You're right, Stephen. There's so many detoxes and cleanses, et cetera, et cetera. The closest to nature you can get, the better. In my opinion, the body is so intelligent and it's much more gentle than we think. Some of those detoxes can actually put your liver in shock for months. And that's not going to help you because your liver is your greatest support when it comes to any kind of cleanup in your body, getting rid of the accumulation. again, closest to nature. I like medical mediums 28-day. Now, not everybody can do that because they start out really sensitive or the digestive system is super sensitive. But that's one of the things that we try to do is go as close to nature. And someone who's super sensitive, they might start out with just cooked fruits and vegetables because it's gentler on the inside of the digestive system and doesn't trigger the nervous system so much. But as close to nature as possible, and don't try and push it. Forcing a cleanse can actually do more damage because it pushes the adrenals and causes your liver to be underwater even more. So going slow and treating your body as a whole and working with nature and all those fruits and vegetables that are available to us is going to be much more effective. When it comes to bread, here's the thing. Most of the time you can't get clean bread that doesn't have toxic heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, the other aspect is it feeds bacteria on the way through your digestive system. So it adds to that load. Now, bread is really exciting because it's got all that texture and flavor. I don't encourage people to try and replace things. So if you're not eating meat, why would you eat something like the Impossible brand that's not made of something that's nutritive to your body? Skip the meat, be a vegan, be a vegetarian. Why would you need meat replacement pieces? If you're looking for that emotionally, deal with the emotions, not trying to replace something that you've eliminated that might actually be beneficial for you. The next thing is, again, bread breaks down into a glucose that can methylate in your brain. Instead of actually fuel you properly, it gives fuel in a way that can end up adding to the toxic level. So do I avoid bread all the time? No, but it's definitely not a staple. And when I was cleaning up my body, I completely avoided any kind of bread or bread products just because I can't get rid of the accumulation if I'm adding stuff in that's not beneficial to the physical body. I'm all about sustainability and not forcing, though. So there's better choices. Sourdough that's homemade. I tell you, if somebody showed up with one of those, I wouldn't be stressed. I wouldn't eat a lot of it, but I would have some because I would. Again, it's so important for us to remember that all of these pieces work together. And if we're just looking at one thing, we're probably not going to get the answers that we're looking for. So if I just focus on physicality, I'm going to miss the other aspects of myself, the energetic aspect of myself that can be used too in order to let go of some of these habits that, again, are emotionally or mentally oriented.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask one more of the submitted questions. We can stay on a little longer to answer a few more questions. I know you have set aside the time, Judy, so thanks. And then I know I have at least one final question for you. So this is a submitted question. You addressed this a little earlier, but I'm curious how you'd respond to this specifically. One of the themes I'm interested in is the pleasure of eating healthy, beautiful food. Do you not experience any pleasure in nourishing your body with fresh, healthy food? Certainly patterns can come into this area as well, but even without persistent patterns, it seems as if I would still derive enjoyment from the act of eating healthy, nourishing food. Is there just more space for our natural enjoyment and love to take other forms when food is not a significant space holder in life?
You've pegged it. If there's a food that I'm smelling cooking in the house, for me, I can get just as much enjoyment from smelling that as having to eat it. I notice that if there's a taste that happens, it's definitely much more conscious and deliberate. And in that moment, I can get all the enjoyment that I would have from one taste versus filling myself completely. So one taste, I might enjoy that for 10 minutes and everybody else has done their meal. That's how fast most people eat or work with it. But when it comes to that, I can get so much more enjoyment out of the energetics that are coming in that I'm digesting through my system than I can from feeling full and feeling that lump move through my body. So this enjoyment isn't enough at this point to deal with all the heaviness that comes from having to digest food, or all the heaviness that comes from having to prepare it. You know, I imagine the house that I want to build next. It doesn't really have a kitchen. You know, it just doesn't. What would I need that for? If I've released myself from food, I can bring my housing costs down. I can bring my square footage into some new, you know, my kitchen can be a dance space or, you know, so what does that look like? Well, I've just freed myself up to enjoy so many other things. I'm not in the bathroom the same way for the same amount of time. The body is so much cleaner. It smells fresher, sweeter. There's a different when you're not burning up all that food that not all of it's super efficient. There's so many other things. And I wondered that too. I really did. It's like, what am I going to do for enjoyment? Because I love cooking. I love gardening. Why am I gardening? I don't need to eat it all. I get a lot of enjoyment of connecting with everything and nothing. So there's much more enjoyment now when I'm sitting quiet, I'm hearing all this music that's coming from within. When it's not suppressed or it's not covered over by all of that eating, all of that processing, all of that everything, all the eliminating. It's like, it's not like it's bad. It's not as fun to me now. And that's happened over time. It's been a gradual thing. Again, I wasn't forcing anything. It happened. And the enjoyment increased and the need for food decreased. And all of those things just no longer were part of what I needed anymore. And it's closer to who I want to be. At least that's what I hear on the inside. So bringing it forward.
Oh, I'm so glad someone asked that question because your answer was so great. In that moment, the idea of the house you want to build doesn't need a kitchen. That's just one of those explode through mind moments of like, it can just look completely different. You know, you could have a dance space. I find that, you know, really resonate with the ways you listed off earlier, the things you were seeking out of food. You know, one of them, I certainly feel that is connection. I often feel, oh, why am I eating this right now? It's like to connect with someone. There's such a different experience or deeper experience possible without filling that need or want with food. Yeah, powerful.
I have friends at this point that understand and have worked through the medical medium process, and they'll have us over. And there's this beautiful meal. It's absolutely beautiful. And I'm getting so much pleasure from smelling it. And I may take a taste or I may not. I have to check in every time I check in. But then there's this little pot of a cup of like broth or healing, you know, a few vegetables. And oh, that just thrills me. I'm like lit up by that. One, there's a connection that is golden for me. And two, I'm feeling, you know, like I'm able to respect my body and what it's asking for. And I'm not just sitting there doing, you know, I'm sipping on this beautiful broth or soup or whatever that's super light if I want to. And my friends know that just because they do that for me, I may or may not. It's what it is, but that's what most people gather around is food. So I can still participate and be part of that and not make everybody uncomfortable, because that's one of the things that I really had to work with. I have people all the time that say, oh, you're doing something that's dangerous, or, you know, you should eat. For that young woman that was being told she should eat meat, you know, pushed on her, pushed on her, pushed on her. That was that person's fear being projected. And that's what most food is fear projected or some concept projected. Same with the medical system. You know, I've experienced it in my life personally. Stephen, you're dealing with that. Most all of us have dealt with the burying aspects of the medical system that cause you to start doubting, and you feel completely suppressed by, or you know, on and on and on. I don't even want to add energy to that right now, but to be able to be independent of that and recognize there's so much more you can do for yourself. Letting go of all this accumulation has let me let go of that dependence on the medical system and the food supply. And, you know, now the curiosity for me is what's the next system? And all I have to do is ask, you know, am I going to ask how I can be independent of the financial system now? And then all those answers come up. It's like, okay, but not from somebody else telling me how to do it, but from just asking that question. What is next in releasing myself from this next system, or releasing this from the next system, or living a life released from that system? However the question comes up. I don't always decide what the questions are even, but the answers are so ready. Again, if you're having chronic illness, it's hard because the noise of the pain, it's loud. And this speaks very subtly and very profoundly, but there's not one thing in the body that I've come across in thousands and thousands of people that isn't a message when it comes to a symptom. Whatever discomfort, whatever symptom it is, it's a message. So let's uncover, let's translate that. Let's see what, you know, really resonates for you. So for me, it's just what happens for us. We have our paths and everybody has a different one. Again, I don't speak to everyone taking the path I've taken. But the time is super ripe to release so many of these things.
It's great. Thank you. I want to get to a couple more in the chat, and then Theresa, maybe your question. An iridologist, this is from Trina, an iridologist told me that we all have a salt and potassium deficit and should add that in. Do you agree?
No. And yes. So adrenal fatigue, it is often not just that your adrenals have been pushed so hard, it's that you don't have the proper minerals, chemicals, etc., to bring proper adrenaline together. So sodium and potassium are two of those things that help with a lot of the processes in our body, but adding them supplementally is like a fire hose at your liver. Sodium often, unless it's presented in a fruit or a vegetable, is really dehydrating. So it contributes to the chronic dehydration. They all work together. It's this beautiful web of things. So getting them from fruits and vegetables and allowing your adrenals to get quieter so it's not burning up those nutrients, you can rebuild without needing a whole bunch of supplements or doing something from the outside of a fruit or a vegetable. That's why I like celery salt or celery juice. It doesn't matter whether you mix it in order to get those cell salts, but in order to do really beneficial things with that herb, because celery is an herb, you want to do it by itself, no water, no nothing else, just celery juice, because that's the type of sodium that your adrenals and the rest of your body need. And yes, we are deficient in that kind. Most of us aren't deficient in the sodium that we don't need. We're deficient in the sodium that we do need. Not all supplements, not all nutrients. You can't blanket it. There's a lot of subtlety to it. And again, how can we bring that in from the energetics? If I'm breathing right now, okay, I don't ask for specifics anymore, but for a while I knew I had some deficiencies, so I would ask for specifics, but I close my eyes and I just let my body know. There are so many energetic signatures that are beneficial around me. What is it that what is it that you need? And if I breathe, can you access that? And so that's what I do as much as possible. And then maybe I might still go have a banana for some potassium. But that's another aspect of fear when it comes to food. Don't eat this and don't eat that and don't eat anything else. Don't eat too many bananas because of potassium. Don't eat potatoes because they cause weight. Don't eat too much fruit because it's too much sugar and you'll end up with diabetes. I wish we could tell everybody in the world that they've been taught to avoid nature for profit, for control, for all of that. Because when it comes to second degree diabetes, it's not sugar, it's fats. So we get to the root of it again. We don't have to be fearful of those things if we just stick to nature. I get it. It can be a little uncomfortable when you start eating just fruits and vegetables. The detox it can be intense. When something comes into your body, it can cause damage, right? It causes the nerves to be inflamed. It causes your body to be inflamed. When that's coming out of your body, it can cause some damage too. It can inflame your nerves. It can cause, so detox it's healing, and it gets very confusing because most of us by the medical system have been trained to suppress or accept that it's a 3-month healing process. That's how most people do it, but it's not. The body moves much more slowly and more gently. It takes how many years to create an oak tree? We're nature too. You don't have to go out in nature. You have it with you all the time. All the time.
Cool. And then one last one from the chat. Can supplements taken long-term over many years give us problems? For example, glucosamine sulfate. This is from Sue.
Yes. In that your liver, again, if your body's not using something properly and you don't have all the other aspects involved, that can actually build up in your tissues because your body can't use it all. Again, most supplements to me are really challenging for the body because you've got this liver, you've got this digestive system. Only so much can be processed, especially if your liver is struggling. And so if you send in, you need 1 bucket and you send in 10, what is the body supposed to do with the other 9? It's going to use the 1 and it's either going to store or eliminate the rest. So you're bringing your energy down because you're having to process or you're having to deal with what needs to be eliminated. Some of it doesn't get fully eliminated if your body's not working, and then it's in your bloodstream. You just have all sorts of trash moving around in your bloodstream. And so oxygen doesn't get to your cells properly and nutrients don't get where they belong and all of that. So yes, if you're having to take a supplement long-term, look at the other aspects, look at the other contributing factors, because maybe it's not all about that one supplement. Maybe it's about bringing balance to the whole system one way or another. And you follow it in. Symptom, listen, see where it takes you. It might take you on a trip all over the place, but follow the signs, follow the information that your body's giving to you as best you can, or find a practitioner that's really good at helping you identify and start listening and helping you engage your body's healing ability. Can we do this really quickly? Absolutely. I have individuals that work with just emotions and they change the physical structure. They change the physical expression in their lives, and they do it quite quickly. It's not very comfortable, but they do it quite quickly. And they're not putting their systems into shock. They're just doing a ton. Well, they need to not do anything else but that for a while. Can we energetically do this? I think that the more we let go of the things that cause us to contract, it's part of nature too. There's contraction and expansion, but we all are caught in this contraction piece. And the more we can let go of what causes us to contract, the more naturally our body lets go of what doesn't serve us. So it's not just about the foods and supplements. It's also about the other aspects of us that allow us to just let source move through us. Source is always there. Source is always moving through us and living us. And we don't notice it because of all the extra layers, but it's still there. It's still happening just like it would. It's just, it gets brighter for us because we drop these layers that the beliefs, the medical and the food supply, that gets in the way of us seeing all that incredible bright energy that we are.
Woo! You know, we often do these short clips of these interviews after, so people can get a flavor who didn't attend. And you've said so many things. Like, there's been so many times, like, "Whoa, that's so powerful." I'm like, I don't think we could do a short clip of this. Just too much good stuff. But one last question, I just wanted to ask, and I know you've already said a lot of great things about people are at different starting points, and you don't want to force anything. Just, for people who are inspired and want to get started on a path toward greater freedom from food and medical systems, on this type of path toward themselves in a different way, like you've been describing, knowing there are different places that people are beginning. What would you recommend? I know someone in the chat asked where you started with medical medium, for example, but what would you recommend in terms of how people can get started and take steps from this conversation?
From this conversation, honestly, the very first thing that they can do is start adding some fresh lemon or lime to their water. That right there brings another level of energy and life to our systems. Add a little honey, because that's going to keep your adrenals and fuel you in a really powerful way. And then start checking it out energetically, what's available. So if I'm breathing, am I just taking in oxygen? What else is in that oxygen? What else is available to me in this space, this energetic space around me, that I can imagine, or I can intuit, or I can feel inspired to receive or recognize? Because recognizing is a big part of it. If you started with that and the living water, you're already ahead of the majority of individuals that are oriented towards health. The medical medium information is such a huge, like, the amount of information is overwhelming. If you're just every day doing your life, it would take you a couple years to really get it all, listen to it all, distill it down so that you could use it really well. It's good stuff, though. It's really good stuff. It's about bringing it back to nature. Quit eating things that have been processed, that aren't close to nature. If you could have picked it, it might show up in a container. Apples show up in containers so they don't get all bruised. So I can't say anything in plastic or cardboard is not going to be nature oriented. But if you could pick it from a tree or pull it from the ground or gather it, work towards that slowly but surely. Start adding more of that into your life, because they're energy signatures that are in a form of transportation. And really absorb that, really chew lots to get all the energy that you can out of that. That's a lot of things already. Just that is enough to do for most people. But that's why I do the work that I do, because that's all I do. I try and get rid of as much technology background work as I can. But that's why I distill the medical medium information and I share my story, so that, one, we know what's possible, and two, we have a bit of a pathway to work towards that. I don't necessarily think medical medium is the only pathway for everyone. I really work at detaching. I have people that, stage 4 cancer, and they come and they start, and then they realize they don't really want to do this anymore. And so we go into conscious transition, because I'm not attached to the physical body either. It doesn't matter to me. It's about you listening to what's right for you, because staying in the physical body or leaving the physical body, they don't have greater weight for me. I'm just here to help you do what you want to do. And that's important to me, because we all have different paths. Every single one of us. People go out for lunch with my husband and they're like, "Your wife is a health consultant, right?" because of what he's ordering. You're like, huh, okay. And it's not my path. It's not for me to get on him. It's for me to be available if he's looking for information because he's wanting to do something different. But that's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. So I'm here for people that want to ask questions and want to go there, but it's really their path. It's your path, your path. How can you get quiet enough out here that you don't need any other cleanse or any other thing, because this is explaining to you what it is you truly need. And the difference between the food in the beginning, medical medium, and towards the end, I talk about a 3-phase process. To begin with, you're recovering your liver. To begin with, you're bringing things into balance. After that, it's about cleaning up all the accumulation. And we don't have to eat this much food in order to get all the nutrients in order to do these processes later on, because we've done them. We've done them. And medical medium doesn't cover that. He's still helping people get into the system. He's still helping people get onto fruits and vegetables. He's still helping people understand the concepts, the root issues to a lot of problems. He doesn't help people after that, really. And I've taken so many people through the process that I've been able to work out or intuit, or it's been shared with me how to help people just keep going on the path so they're not in kitchen jail forever. Don't want to do that. We're not about that. We're getting rid of the kitchen as best we can, if that's your path. Again, if that's your path. But this process is all about letting go of both the food supply system and the medical system. Not for everything. Again, my daughter thinks about letting go of her health insurance, but she doesn't let go of her accident insurance. Why? Because the medical system is good at that. They're just not trained when it comes to a lot of this other stuff, when it comes to chronic illness, or when it comes to the pieces that we actually, it's beneficial if we're responsible for ourselves. Our bodies know better anyway. We just have to learn to listen and follow that path, because it'll get us across that gap. It'll get us from over here to where we realize we don't really need food the same way we thought we did. And we can drop those fears because we're proving to ourselves that I didn't do water for 4 days. Isn't it 3 days that you can go without water? No food, no water for 4 days. And I know individuals that have done it for a long time, way longer, like months and months and months. No food, no water. They didn't die. So if that's a possibility, my questions have the ability to give me information about what else is possible that's not been portrayed necessarily. When you can get joy out of your heart beating, because you can feel it, because you're not so full in your stomach over here on the left side, you can feel your heart beating. And you know that you didn't have to do anything for that to happen. When you can get extreme joy out of knowing that you can handle hot and cold temperatures without struggling or suffering. When you can get complete joy out of just being with your friends, no talking, no anything, no eating. You can gaze in their eyes. You can close your eyes. You can just resonate in the energy of it. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we listen to what's here and just go with it?
Wow.
That's great, Judy.
It's amazing. So inspiring. And you should definitely see the chat after this. So much resonance, and people really connected with what you've shared today deeply.
Fantastic.
Also connecting with you, Judy, is the best way to reach you. Some people have asked about your offerings. Is it truehealthdetective.com? Is that the best way to reach you after this?
Yep. Yep. I apologize to everyone in advance. Again, that's my next question, and my next system to release myself from is the financial system. So there's shifts happening on an ongoing basis as it as it evolves. And I'm trying to make it as seamless as possible. But every once in a while, there's a few glitches. But yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. And if you have, any time to just sit and recognize that you're already in nature, you're going to start getting a lot of these answers yourself. So I'm here. I'm absolutely here. And I so encourage just a little bit of listening.
Beautiful. Well, Judy, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate everybody who joined us live and all your great questions, but also just the great energy in the chat. Has been lots of fun to include here as we've been talking with Judy. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Theresa, any final remarks?
No, it's tremendous. I've just had such a good time being with
Yeah,
you. Got
yeah, thank you so much, Judy.
so much resonance of truth, and so much has just clicked inside of me listening to you, and very just bringing me closer to myself and what I really want and need. So it's been a really, really fantastic experience. I so appreciate you, and I'm grateful for this time.
So welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope everybody has amazing day. Every day is amazing day. It's the one word that's true for me still. I use words to communicate with people, but amazing is the one word that is so true no matter what. Only one. That's the only one that's super true for me. It's a process. It's a journey. I hope you enjoy yours.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay.